Boom, here we go. Mary Phagan Kean, ancestor of the late Mary Phagan, who was tragically murdered and raped by a Jewish pedophile, the chapter leader of Bnai Brith, and the catalyst for why the Anti-Defamation League was formed, the ADL, which is really a defamation league, to try and exonerate him. I'm going to let you have the floor. There's a lot of hoax about what happened, about whether he was pardoned or not, how the trial went. They basically lied about everything constantly. And they're trying to, in Georgia now, to fully exonerate him, which would be a travesty. So I'll let you tell the story about Mary Phagan. You were named after her. How did you first learn that you were related to her?
I'm a military brat, and my dad was in the Air Force. So we went to South Carolina, and at R.B. Stahl High School, I had a science teacher by the name of Mr. Henry. And back in my day, you got to remember, I'm 70. So back in my day, the teachers lined us up and just, checked our names off. So as he got to my name, he said, name. I said, Mary Phagan. And he said, stopped. He looked at me and he said, there was a little girl that was murdered in Atlanta in the 1920s. Are you related to her? And I said, I don't know. After that, the boys, of course, at 13, I was traumatized. They said that I was dead and that I was reincarnated. And so I became very upset and didn't like the fact that they were teasing me about being dead. So I cried all the way home, and Daddy happened to be at home. And so I looked at him and I said, who's the girl named Mary Phagan that was murdered that Mr. Henry told me about? And I'm telling you, my dad just stood in shock. The history of the name Mary Phagan has been very quiet. The Phagan family has never spoken out for years and years and years. So nobody in the Phagan family ever mentioned the story. They didn't talk about it. There was a silence that was put on by my great grandmother, Fanny Phagan Coleman. And
Your
so
teacher
Dad,
got the date wrong, but I'm surprised.
right.
I mean, in Georgia, I understand, but in South Carolina, I'm surprised he had heard of the event at all.
Well, really people have, and it's amazing. I always thought that. Well, and I will tell you this part. And I thought, okay, well, so Dad basically told me the story that I was related, and then I was to go back to school tomorrow and tell Mr. Henry that yes, I was related. I was named for her, and I'm the great niece and namesake. And he told me that she was murdered. He did not use the rape word with me. He just told me that she was murdered, and she was murdered by Leo Frank. Never said he was Jewish, nothing like that. He just said she was murdered, and then he was lynched by a vigilance committee after the governor commuted his sentence, and that's all he told me. Well, I thought, okay, that sounds cool. I'm 13, right?
The governor did that the like day before he resigned too.
Exactly. He certainly did. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll never be asked that question again. No problem. Okay, in one ear, out the other at age 13. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm.
grandfather got sick here in Atlanta, and Dad decided to move the family because he retired from the Air Force to come back to Atlanta and be with our family here. And went to a high school called Shamrock High School. And on the first day of school, all six of my teachers asked me if I was related to little Mary Phagan. And my answer was, yes, I am. I'm the great niece, and I was named after her. So my mind got to going really crazy, and I thought, there's a lot more to this story than what my father told me, because why would all those teachers know about it? So I went back home and I said, Dad, there is much more to this story than you told me, because every one of my teachers asked me if I was related to little Mary Phagan. And of course, I told him yes. He said, there is. But I just felt like you were so young at 13 that I couldn't explain things to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so he finally said to me, I will tell you more about it. So he told me, and this is the term that he used, that Leo Frank was a sexual pervert. I still didn't know what that meant at age 15. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I was very protected in the Air Force community, the military community, and we just never heard things like that. So
You
I
lived in
asked what.
Japan for a while too, didn't you?
Yes, I lived in Japan and Hawaii, and it was just incredible that they asked me that question, and I thought, okay. So, like I said, he told me that he was a sexual pervert. Then my question was, what is a sexual pervert? So he made me go get a dictionary and look up the word sexual pervert. And I said, "Ooh, Daddy, that's terrible."
The
Then
picture of
he,
Hunter Biden. No.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was terrible. I was shocked that somebody could do that to a little girl that was 13 years old. I thought, oh my goodness.
Well,
Ironically,
apparently multiple girls he did that to, but
oh
we'll get to
yes, there
that.
was about
Yeah.
20 of them, and not just girls. There was boys. I have done some
Hmm.
research, and there is a couple boys that testified as well. So it just wasn't girls. So I think people need to be aware of that, and that just verifies the sexual perversion that my family has believed in all these
Knocked one of them
110
up
years.
too.
Right, right. It verifies everything, because it's in writing and it's in evidence. And of course, we don't hear that other part. We don't hear that from the communities that are studying the case or the historians that they talk about. What they forget to tell you about the historians of the case is the fact that most of them are the same religious faith as Leo Frank. They're Jewish. So they already have a bias and, claim the anti Semitism route and everything. But anyway, Dad did tell me more, and he said, "Well, I think that what you need to do is you need to go and research and do it on your own. You will have my bias of the opinion." I asked if I could talk to my grandfather about it. And this is where I get a little emotional. Apologize for that. And my dad told me I could. And I went and I talked to grandfather. And he looked at me and he went out, stood up, and he got the picture of little Mary.
Hmm.
And he pointed to me and he pointed to her and told me that I looked like her. And so I asked him the question, who murdered her? And he told me Leo Frank, and he said Lynch, and that's all he did. And then he started crying. And I could never ask him a question again after that. To see him so emotionally distraught was a horrible feeling for me at age 15. To see your grandfather break down. He was her protector. She was born in Alabama, and most people think she's born in Georgia. That is not accurate. Most people say that Mary Phagan's mother, Fanny Phagan Coleman, married right after her husband died. He died in Alabama. Her father was John Phagan. He died of measles, ironically, which we
Huh.
now have a measles thing now again today, So I thought that was kind of weird. Now we have measles again. And I'm like, wow, that's really strange. So that happened in the 1900s, 1912. So she was like 5 months old when he died from the measles. So the family moved back to Marietta and stayed with her brother, Mrs. Phagan's brother and mother. And they stayed on a farm there. And then great grandfather, still remained in Alabama with all the other family. And he eventually moved everybody here back to Georgia. So that's what happened with that. So I needed to go and find out all the information. And so I couldn't drive at the time. I wasn't allowed to drive. I didn't have a license. So my mother, Philomena Phagan, uh, drove me everywhere that I wanted to go. And we went to the libraries and we went to the Georgia State Archives, where at that time, back in the 70s, that was where the majority of the information was available to us. So we go into the Georgia State Archives and there's a 10-foot picture of the lynching of Leo Frank as we entered that library.
Hmm.
I was so disturbed. I had never seen a picture of a lynching before. And it really bothered me. And we signed in and they said, "Are you related?" And we said, "Yes." So they brought all the files. So that was when I started my quest of getting research. Just for your audience's information, I have donated 57 years worth of all my stuff since age 13, to a collection at Georgia State University with a lot of original documents, which is some are very rare because unfortunately documents have disappeared. So one of the major documents that disappeared happened in the 1960s when
65, right?
Right, 65. Leonard Dennerstein and Harry Golden's book, A Little Girl Is Dead, they were both researching the case, and somehow the trial transcript disappeared. There is no trial transcript. So that's what they have called it, a brief of evidence. So that's what you have to study, is that brief of evidence. But the really way to study, in my opinion, is to go back to those newspapers, the Georgian, the Constitution, and the Journal, and go back and you have to read them because they have the questions in there that were asked.
Hmm.
So that really helped clarify everything. So I've read every single one of those articles for for those newspapers. It's interesting because today what they're doing is they're saying that the case was sensationalized by the media, and the media did all this. Ironically, again, the editors of those three newspapers were really for Leo Frank, and other authors have said that. And it's quite they most people don't know, but those editors were also the same religious faith as Leo
They
Frank.
tried to frame a colored man too.
Two of them, and a white
White.
man too. There was a
Yep.
white man too, Jim Gant, who was a family friend. And this is where conflict comes in, and people say, "Oh, Leo Frank didn't know Mary Phagan." Okay, he had to walk by her station every day that he had to go to the restroom. And yet, when he was interrogated by the detectives, he recommends certain people for them to question because he said they knew where they were very close to Mary Phagan. In fact, like I said, Jim Gant, the neighbor, the family member, a family member was arrested, and Leo Frank, gave the information to the detectives about him. He was white, and the first person he charged did was Newt Lee, the night watchman.
Yeah.
And then Jim Conley, Jim Gant, and of course, Leo Frank didn't know Mary Phagan. I don't believe that, and most people don't believe that either when he had to walk by her station. She was a very young child. She was a very beautiful young girl. She had blue eyes. She had dimples. She was very petite. I'm petite too. I'm 4'11". She was 4'11". She, however, was what my great grandmother called well built. And so you know what that means. She had
She
a good
played
big,
Sleeping Beauty in Sleeping Beauty,
yes,
didn't she? Yeah.
yes. And my grandfather had to watch her. So, see, she was very well protected. Um, so a lot of people say, well, you say that, but why did she go to the pencil factory? And I thought, well, here's the story. The reason why she went to the pencil factory, she didn't work the week before. In fact, I found a record. My oral history has been verified by documentation now. And I'm proud to say that. My dad told me she had quit the week before, and I found that article in the newspaper where she quit.
I found similar. She went on a Saturday instead of
Yep.
Friday to get her paycheck.
Right, because she wasn't there working because the metal hadn't come in, and they put notices that since Saturday was Confederate Memorial Day, they would pick up paycheck would be on Friday,
It
and
was only like $1.35 or something too.
$1.20. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something.
So
Yeah.
that's why she went, and she did go alone to that pencil factory because the family knew that she was meeting friends, and they were okay with that. And she rode the trolley to work, so they had no issues with that. She wore a lavender outfit that was made by her Aunt Lizzie. They were, they were not poor like people depict her walking like that mini series, NBC miniseries in 1988. There she was barefoot and all this stuff. That is not true at all. Her great grandfather was a wealthy landowner and farmer in Marietta. So I mean, we're buried in the richest part of the cemetery in Marietta. So I mean, that all that stuff is just totally false. And they just making a story better, I guess, by saying she was poor and she had to work.
Speaking of the cemetery, didn't they change the marker on it?
Oh yeah.
Oh
my God. You want to hear
we'll
that
get
story?
to that.
Okay. Here is the story. It's been 30
Okay.
years. All right. So in 1994, we were contacted by the Marietta City Cemetery, said that they were going to put historical markers throughout the cemetery, and they wanted to do Little Mary Phagan. And my father said, no, she does not need a marker. She's got a beautiful marker. And I do believe that, he was concerned that somebody might destroy it, but it has never been that way. It has always been, there's so many things on her marker. It's amazing. They leave teddy bears, flowers. I mean, it's just the cutest thing. And little kids leave pennies and books and everything. It's just a beautiful thing to see when I go to the cemetery. So the Marietta City Council agreed, and Mayor Joack Wilson at the time called my dad and said, I really want a marker at Mary's grave. And he said, but she doesn't need one. Who's the most visited grave in the cemetery? Mary Phagan. Everybody knows where she's buried. You just ask and you go and you find it. You know what I'm saying? She didn't need a marker. Well, he convinced Dad to go ahead and do a marker, and he said that he would give my father could do the final approval of the marker. So they did. And they wrote the marker. And at the end of the marker, it says, without addressing his guilt or innocence. The posthumous pardon was given without addressing his guilt or innocence. In 1995, a rabbi by the name of Stephen LeBeau addressed the Jewish community and stood up and demanded that the marker be changed because it was offensive to the Jewish community, saying that he was pardoned without addressing his guilt or innocence.
What does
So,
that have to do with Jews? Just because he was a Jew? Like,
yes.
that doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense.
he's saying it's anti-Semitism, and there was no anti-Semitism at the trial. There's no evidence of it and all that stuff. And I will tell you this part, when you go into the newspaper accounts of it, not one time is Leo Frank listed as the Jewish superintendent. He's listed as superintendent of the National Pencil Company. So what does that tell you? I mean, they're just making something out of it. As you said, they just plant evidence and then they just repeat it, and eventually it becomes the truth. But I will not allow this story to become their truth. It is my truth, not their truth. And they tell big lies. So the rabbi told these big lies and all this stuff. Well, I went to cemetery, and to clean the cemetery, they changed the marker. They completely changed the marker without notifying the family. They did all this in secret, and I do have evidence to support that. I am doing a revision of the book. It will be out either in April or June of this year.
No,
And,
soon.
I have all that stuff in the book so that people can see that I am telling the truth. And
I
I
tell
have
the
evidence.
audience this too. He was convicted by a jury of his peers by other Jews. Like, it didn't.
No, he
That
was
wasn't an
not. There were
issue for
not any
anybody
Jews.
except Bnai, Brith, and then the ADL. That's
Yeah,
who
there
made
were
it a
no
Jews.
Jewish people on the trial for the jury. There were for the trial before that, the court before that. There was like 4 or 5 of them
For
that were of the same religious faith as Leo Frank. Yes, and so they, you know, they said let's move forward. They went with the whole thing. It was 25-0 for the grand jury. And they were on the grand jury. And are you ready for this? The grand jury did not have Jim Conley's testimony. They never knew about Jim Conley when they did it. So they were just gathering the evidence there. So back to the sign is, yeah, I couldn't believe it. So I called a reporter friend of mine at the Marietta Daily Journal, and Bill Kinney. I said, Bill Kinney, I said, what's going on with the marker change? He said, what do you mean? I said, they changed the marker. He said, really? I said, yes. So he met me at the cemetery and he went, well, they did change the marker. So I do have that evidence. Like I said in the book, I have the article of where it's being
that's
called
so
out.
petty. Would
It's
they just sneak in
ridiculous.
there and do that? Like,
Yeah, well, they did it clandestinely. They did it in the middle of the night because I know somebody that called me and told me after the article came out. She said, "Oh yeah," she said, "I was aware. They all met at Philip Goldstein's office and they all did it and they decided as a team. They never went through any
a
judicial
little secret
procedure."
meeting. We're gonna go
Yeah,
sneak in the graveyard and change the
yeah,
marker.
yeah. That's what they are.
That's
Everything's secret
shady.
with this case. It's secret, 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 secret. And Phagan family never knows anything what's going on. So it's really hard when you just all of a sudden you read something in the paper and it's like, you've got to be kidding me. So yeah, that was hard thing. So what the sign now says at the end, it says Leo Frank was issued a posthumous pardon. I'm calling it bamboozling the public because what they're saying to the public is he was found not guilty. You know, and I'm
He was
like,
found guilty, and
he
the
was found
government
guilty,
community
and
sentenced. They
that
broke
sign,
into jail and they hanged him.
and they said, and the jail said, I mean, the sign said, implies otherwise. So, I really wish they take the sign down. She
They're
never
trying
needed
to
a sign.
pretend that he was framed because
Yes,
he was a Jew.
yes, exactly. That anti-Semitism was the reason. There was no anti-Semitism during the trial at all. It did come out 2 times during the trial. One was on August 14th, 1913, and all the papers reported Leo Frank's mother shouted at Solicitor Dorsey, and neither will you dog, Gentile dog. Okay, so that's the first time it came in.
That's her doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, she had to be removed. She was removed from the trial for that. That was the first time. The last time it came as the last day of the trial, where they got the trolley conductor George Kenley to get people to testify that said that if he was on the jury, he would take that damn Jew and hang him by the neck. And that's unfortunately how it ended. I will tell you something else too that I really discovered. The defense had a very prominent law firm that defended Leo Frank, and they were very fair, pay very well. I think like $15,000 in 1913. You know, of
Wow.
course, now today it's worth like millions today. You know, it was unbelievable to me that these men had such intelligence, integrity, and were considered the best. Do you know what their defense was? No?
Give it to us.
All right. The defense was that Jim Conley, the black man, did it, and that no white person would ever commit such a crime. They used white privilege. That was their defense.
They figured a bunch of Southerners would be prejudiced toward the black guy.
Exactly. Yes, and they
But
don't
Leo
tell
Frank
you that.
was a Yankee.
Yeah, and I know, and they don't tell you that Jim Conley withstood 3 days of cross-examination by
It was
those
just all
attorneys,
the
and they couldn't break
evidence
them. They
goes to
didn't break
Leo
them.
Frank, and it was other girls. It was Rebecca Carson. It was
Yes.
Dewey, I think her name was.
Dewey Howell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Hugh. Yeah, and
Like,
there's a whole bunch of them. And
they
one, I think it
all
was.
he was molesting all these people,
Mhm.
and yeah, he definitely knew who Mary was. She worked at
Yes.
his
Yes.
factory.
So that's what happened in 1995, and that sign is still there. I will tell you that. So in 2016. So I had to wait for certain people to pass because they said it would cause so much controversy. And I guess they didn't want to live it. So I decided that I wanted to live it. I put my own marker up on Mary's grave. Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, they didn't like what I said, but I just felt like people needed to know that who Mary was, where she was born, and all this stuff, and that sign over there did not exonerate Leo Frank. There is one thing wrong on the sign that I will say, and that I think people need to hear this as well. It said the Knights of Mary Phagan, and this is before the pandemic. So when the pandemic came, I had heard the Knights of Mary that they called themselves, but my dad always said it was a vigilance committee. And so during pandemic, I researched again, and guess what? My daddy was right. They called themselves the Vigilance Committee. These were very well-known, prominent leaders of the Marietta Committee. You go down in Marietta, and all the streets are named after them.
It wasn't some mob. It was a vigilance committee.
It was not a mob. That was a very well military, tactic of getting in. And then, and it's funny.
It wasn't uncommon in the South for rapists to never even make it to trial.
Right. Right. And that's what they thought, that Jim Conley would probably have just been lynched instead. But, they did not. So it was really, when I found out about this, it was actually the first lynching done by automobile.
Yeah, it's like a
so that tells
chase.
Tells you all you got to do is what my daddy told Steve Oney, who wrote the book in 2003, his book "And the Dead Shall Rise" and all that. He said, go look what the names are for the automobiles. And the same thing. Only certain people would own automobiles. So that's what I'm saying. They were very, very well known, and it was good for me, like I said, to find out the truth, that there were no Knights of Mary Phagan. So here's the Knights where
the whole town knew he was guilty, and then what he had done to other girls. So it was, the governor could say whatever he wants. This guy is not going to get away with it.
Right. And there's things about the governor too that I'll explain as well.
Bribed.
But he was a member of the law firm that defended Leo Frank, which most people don't know. And he had a visitor from the attorneys the night before he issued the commutation. So they had lookouts at the governor's mansion, and they saw who went in and who went out. So, yeah, we know who wrote it. The defense attorneys wrote the commutation. He didn't attend the trial. He got all the notes and all that stuff, and he said, "Oh, this and this and that." But I know it's not like I'm rambling on. It's just there's so much in my head of what.
For those who want to know why I look like one of the X-Men, I just had eye surgery yesterday. That's why I'm doing shades in the dark. So I'm not weirdo or something. It's like look like a Unabomber, but I have to be like this. But Yeah, people ought to read about it. There's a lot of BS though. They were screaming "Hang the Jew" and
Yeah,
stuff like that. That never
never
happened,
happened.
but they
No,
put it
and
in.
that was verified by the ADL's own expert, who they uh, encouraged him to write the book, Steve Oney, in 2003. But it's so ironic that they never say that after that. I mean, it's been disputed, it's been proven, it never happened. The
This
court
kind of
system said
thing
the same
makes
thing.
people become anti-Semitic because you have an
It can
individual
be.
guy that molested a bunch of girls. He raped and murdered one of them. He happened to be a Jew. And then all these other Jews come to his defense saying, no, it's this black guy. Oh, no, it was this other black guy. Maybe it was this white guy. Said it couldn't have been him. He's a Jew. He wouldn't do that. But it's because he was Bnai Brith, which is
Right,
a cult. And, these
right,
are not regular Jews. These are hardline fanatic types. And they all stick up for each other, no matter what the
right.
crime. Even if you murder a little girl after raping her,
And
they're
she
on
was
his
brutally
side.
raped, brutally. When I had to read the
Yeah, she
autopsy
was.
report, oh my goodness, I'll get emotional again. It was horrible. It was horrible what he did to her. I'm sorry. It was just horrible for a 13-year-old girl. And
Well, he
that's the
swung
other
for
thing.
it on a tree for it.
Yeah, and they said, so the autopsy report, which nobody talks about, shows that she had no markings on her body. They said that she had blood in her panties. And the defense and the governor, in his commutations, said that it was her menstrual cycle. The family disputes that. The family says that we have evidence from a report that my great grandmother said that Mary was not in puberty, which to me, because I know I'm a female, that, you know, I got a menstrual cycle myself. So I know what that meant. And she did not have one.
1913 girls are not having that period at
No,
13 years old.
no. And my daddy said if she had had her menstrual cycle, she would have had a piece of cloth with two pins tied in there too for the way to collect the blood like they did it back in 1913. And that is true. I verified that what did girls do for feminine protection? And it came up exactly what my daddy said. So I'm sticking with my daddy,
It is
and
not a coincidence that
no.
she's bleeding the day she's murdered. Come on.
No, but she was a virgin. And the hard part for me about this case is how people are smearing little Mary because she was beautiful. She was a little girl, and they claim that even Steve Oney smears her and calls her a voluptuous woman. She was not a woman. She was a little girl. And so that really hurts more than anything. But there's several books that have done that, come out and done that. And oh, she flirts and she does this. The musical parade, when I went to see it, that's what they showed her, and I just about jumped
Can
up
you
out of
imagine
my
that?
seat.
A 13-year-old? What
No.
was she wearing? It doesn't matter.
Well, she was dressed very nice. I mean,
I
her
know.
aunt made her out, but
It's like
she
it
was
doesn't
covered
matter
from
if
head
she
to toe. I'm
walked around in a
looking at her
bikini.
picture. Uh,
Like,
yeah, I'm looking at her picture over here, and it doesn't accentuate her breast, which is why she was big chested, as my grandmother said. She was big for her age, is what she
so
said.
what?
Yeah, so that's okay. But nothing accentuated that. You know what I mean? They deterred that from her when they dressed her, because that's why they made her own clothes, because they knew they didn't want to be a Lana Turner. Ironically, Lana Turner played Mary Phagan, her first role in the
Oh,
30s.
really?
Hmm. Hmm. So that was kind of interesting too. But anyway, I'm trying to think. I know there's so much I want to say. What else have they done? They changed the marker. Then they did the mini series. The year I wrote my book, the Murder of Little Mary Phagan by me. Then they had that mini series, and Georgia crushed the media with how awful this was. What they didn't know was, and in my collection, I happened to get somebody sent me anonymously the whole playwright, a copy of it.
Hmm.
And so I have my library over here in the corner, and I went through and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is Harry Golden's book all over again. A Little Girl is Dead." So if anybody goes and looks at that, they'll see where I'm highlighting on what page, and I compare the pages where it is in Harry Golden's book. They wanted nothing to do with my family. They could care less. And part of the reason why the miniseries came out was because in 1982, the big story came out about Alonzo Mann, the office boy that worked with Leo Frank, and he said that he saw Jim Conley with the body of little Mary Phagan on the second floor. And so that was something that when that came out, and that's the year that I came out. You know, that song, I'm coming out. You know, I was dancing to that song and I'm going, I'm coming out. So I called the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Board and talked to a Michael Wing, and he did not believe I was me. He said, this is a joke. I said, no, I'm Mary Phagan. He said, there's no relatives to little Mary Phagan. I said, no, there are. There's a whole bunch of us. Really? I went, yes, sir. Okay, here comes my military out. Yes, sir. And I said, I would like to know if a pardon is applied for Leo Frank through the American Jewish Community, the Federation of the Jewish Community, and the Anti-Defamation League. And about a year later, he called and said, that we received the application for exoneration for Leo Frank. And I said, okay, thank you very much. I said, well, can we come to the board and present? We're not taking that. They just, we're going to look at evidence. And I said, well, you do know that the trial transcript is missing and all that kind of stuff, right? Unaware totally. So
They have no
they were
clue.
given the materials by the Jewish community, which is to get
What's
their view
disgusting
on.
is that, they keep changing their names, but the National Jewish Congress and the ULA and all these things. The Bronfman families that's ran that for the last 20 years were involved financing an NXIVM cult, which was branding women and also donating money to Jeffrey Epstein through Reported Carbine and Ehud Barak, these little butchers. So pedophile rings of modern times have been financed by the presidents of these same Jewish federations that are also trying to exonerate Leo Frank. And I just don't understand it. Why are you so obsessed with exonerating a murder pedophile?
Well, I think, it comes from Cobb
1913.
County. Yeah, it comes from Cobb County and the city of Marietta because those, like I said, you go down the streets and they're all there. So I think the former governor Roy Barnes is involved in this now. He got involved in I think 2015, if I'm correct. And he and the rabbi and Congress people have gotten together and they came up with a way to exonerate Leo Frank. They look for ways to exonerate him. And so they came up with this idea. So for 3 years, they had been working together. And this is another kind of surprise, but on April 26th, I'm sure you know what that date is. It was the day Mary was murdered. In 2019, Fulton County DA Paul Herrod, Governor Burns, Rabbi LeBeau, and the Anti-Defamation League have a big news conference about the establishment of the Conviction Integrity Unit to exonerate Leo Frank.
Disgusting.
I went, what? And
exonerate him? Why?
Because he's Jewish.
Was convicted
because
of murder.
He's Jewish. I hate to say it.
Well,
and I even have Jewish grandparents.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-Semitic. I have, I just don't understand why they have to. And unfortunately, Governor Barnes has even attended. He did all kinds of things at the
Jews
law
can kill people like anyone else. So what? It just doesn't make any sense. Why are you so obsessed with this guy? He's he did it. Mm-hmm. Okay, he did it. All the evidence shows he did. His peers convicted him of it. That's that.
But and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and then that's a whole nother thing too, with all those court rulings and everything. So anyway, they devised the Conviction Integrity Unit, and they had a whole group of people. I wrote letters. I said, why isn't the Phagan family involved? Why are you doing this? I think Governor Barnes, he just has something going on. And I guess it's because they found out that his wife's grandfather was part of the group, was part of the vigilancy group. And he just has to make a big stink about it and be the almighty power of this authority. And unfortunately for him, he is telling lies and continuing the lies, as well as the rabbi and the ADL. Well, we caught the ADL I mean, when the
All
Stu
they ever
Peters
do is
thing,
lie.
right, with the ADL, they said that he was postuling his pardon, and I said, "Oh no!" And Stu Peters put that up about me saying that how they changed the marker, which I think is great.
Good for
People
him.
need to know what they do, and they do everything in secret. So this conviction integrity unit
Oh,
was
I've
set.
been defamed by the ADL.
Yeah,
So is
well,
Stu, I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure he has too. But anyway, it's just
It's
like,
kind of like what
okay.
happens when you tell the truth about these wars and things. The ADL will say something.
I know. Well, the thing about it is they've been caught. And I really believe truth wins. My dad told me that truth will always win. He said it may take time, but it always wins. And I really feel like this is a big win that the ADL did that. And it's all over. I think there was like 13 million views on one of the videos of the ADL and then it being stuff. So,
The
I
ADL
mean,
got caught spying on LA police departments. I remember Jeff
mhm.
Langford sued him and won. Another Jewish guy, by the way. I've interviewed him many times. The ADL is the ADL and SPLC. They're just defamation leagues for
Well,
Zionists.
they
That's
are,
all they do.
and it was different in the 70s. I will tell you that my family worked with the ADL. I've worked with the ADL because we did, we got a lot of, unfortunately, strange phone calls saying things and wanted me to do interviews, and I just felt uneasy. I just have that instinct.
Hmm.
I have to tell, I have that instinct. And I called the ADL, dad called the ADL, and yep, they were not a good person for me to do with. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they were, and in the 70s, and dad wrote a letter. I mean, we've met with the ADL and everything, but today they just want to spread the lies about Leo Frank. Um, they don't care at all, but they've been caught and they're going to get caught again and again.
Yeah,
Um,
Foxman and then Greenblatt after that. They're just
mhm,
stooges.
right.
They were
And it
disgusting.
really actually started in 2023 with the community noted on Twitter. Jonathan Greenblatt got slammed, and 99% of the comments were that Leo Frank was guilty,
Yeah.
and and stuff. And so, I mean, every year he posts certain things, and then he posted that about the posthumous pardon and got slammed big time again.
What happened was Elon Musk let actual journalists come back to Twitter,
Right?
and so they slammed him.
Yeah,
Before that, none of them were allowed
and
on Twitter.
yeah, and it's going everywhere now. It's going worldwide. I mean, you're in Korea, correct?
Yeah,
Okay, well, I'm saying it's worldwide
yeah.
now, and
Well,
it needs
I've
to
been
be
talking about this
worldwide.
case for since '97 or so.
Okay.
That's when
So
I learned about
you
it.
know a lot about
Yeah.
it too. But the thing about it is that, so that's what they did with well, in my heart, I cried because I thought, okay, this is a done deal. This is a done deal. I mean, Barnes, it even says in the paper that Governor Barnes lobbied the Fulton County DA, Paul Harward, to get this done. He
Hmm.
lobbied for it. Excuse me? Well, circumstances helped and he got defeated by Fonnie Willis.
Good.
Okay, so now Governor Barnes is asking Fonnie Willis, and the rabbi and the ADL is asking Fonnie Willis to bring the Leo Frank case to the Innocence Project so that he can be exonerated. They want to give him a new trial. Well, I said, a new trial?
They're
He's
just
had
doing that
every
all
single trial.
quietly.
He's had every single appeal. I mean, what the heck is going on here? So he's doing that now as well as the rabbi and ADL. And of course, this is 110 years. So it's, what is this, 110 years for his lynching, I believe? Yes. And so they're really putting out everything. I mean, Parade's coming back to the Fox Theater, the musical. I mean, they're doing their whole thing. What happened? So the best things, I'm going to go back a little bit. 2013, with the 100-year of Mary's anniversary, was a team got together and put all this information on the internet about little Mary Phagan and Leo Frank, and that was the best thing that happened to me because I have to go and visit in libraries and stuff like that. I could do it at home now. I couldn't before, and so I was really pleased about that. And then in 2015, the 100th anniversary of Leo Frank. This is all in my book too. The rabbi gets a big billboard up. who paid for the billboard. I came down real quick. But anyway, he
Hmm.
had a big billboard that Leo Frank was innocent. He had Coca-Cola bottles made that Leo Frank is innocent. He had a big meeting at the temple with all these dignitaries and all these people that were part of the establishing the conviction integrity unit. They did all this. They planted trees. They did all this stuff, and it just absolutely drove me crazy. I just didn't have peace of mind for a whole year that year. I mean, you should see the stuff that they promoted. And, we were
Roy
quiet.
Barnes worked for the Aspens Institute, which is just the same place that Louis Leibowitz and all the neocons that lied about Iraq and Syria, which is where they end up.
You know.
So he's just surrounded by scum.
Well, he's not, to me, I don't think he's a very nice person. I mean, why would you announce something like that on the day she was murdered? I just don't get it. Does he not realize that the Phagan family, he knows I exist.
Because he's
He
got
totally
people
ignores
whispering in
me.
his ear.
No, I don't know. He's got, well, I do know this, that,
But how could that be, of all the issues in Georgia, like
right,
that's what's somebody is
promoting.
pushing him to act that way. I'm
Yeah.
certain.
Yeah. Well, ironically, in 2015, they asked Governor Deal to do it. And I wrote a letter, and I really do believe my letter helped change. He said that ship has already sailed. They don't want about it. They don't
It
want to do
shouldn't
it.
be doable. He's
It's,
guilty. You don't get to
y-
years later undo it. Like he did it. Deal
right.
with it.
And that's what I'm saying. I just don't
This is
understand.
not something we should have to worry about. Well, each year a new governor might come in and
Right.
reverse
Exactly.
everything.
No, well, they can't. They can't. At this point, it can't happen here in Georgia. It had to go through the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Board. The governor is not allowed to pardon in Georgia by law. So that's why it went to the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Board. And of course, in 1982, they looked all the evidence. They took over a year and a half to look at everything. Alonzo Mann's testimony. Excuse me, I got a fly in here. They denied the pardon, based that he was not guilty. They said, no, there's no evidence to prove. So they just left it at that. And here comes another part, another secret part. Are you ready for this one? Cracks me up sometimes. There's so many secret parts here. In 1983, they announced that the pardon was denied. So in 80, after that, they got a group of people together with the Pardons and Paroles Board, and they got a young man by the name of Clark Freshman, who was doing a thesis at Harvard on the Frank case. They gave him total access to all the records that the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Boards, but denied me those records.
Hmm.
So he came up with without addressing, without attempting to address his guilt or innocence. And that's where it came from. So for a secret, for a whole year, the day before they announced the pardon, they called my father and I in and told him they were doing it.
He must have been very important to them for them to go all this effort 100 years later trying to exonerate him still. Whatever he was doing for Bnai Brith,
Mm-hmm.
why would you
Well,
stand up for a serial rapist and murderer? It doesn't make any
right.
sense.
Well, the ADL doesn't want that, to be known. They want it's anti-Semitism. They're anti-Semitic. They did this. Okay, you got Jewish editors of all the newspapers that are floating all his innocence. Oh, I did forget one thing. What I was going to say was the New York Times. Oh my goodness. They say that they were so involved in it. The whole time of the trial, they only wrote 5 articles about it. One, he was, arrested. Two, the grand jury said he's going to go to trial. I mean, there was nothing in there. And they were the ones 6 weeks before the Vigilance Committee in 1915 wrote an article about Knights of Mary Phagan. It has never been seen anywhere else. They stirred it up, excuse me, that Knights of Mary Phagan were going to possibly lynch him. And that it was festering here in Georgia. That's where it came from, came from New York. After 6 weeks before, and it never happened. The Knights of Mary Phagan did not do the Ku Klux Klan. It was the birth of a nation, all that kind of stuff. They just tell everything because they want to.
Klan was kind of dead until the film Birth of a Nation came out.
Yes.
and it would have been over. I mean, it was, for those who don't know, the original Klan was a paramilitary group that arose in reaction to private property being confiscated by the North and taking veterans' votes away, and it was fizzled out. It got kind of reinvigorated, ironically, mostly in the North, mostly in like Indiana and Illinois, where were the people in the Klan, not even down south, because of a movie, A Birth of a Nation. That's where you get the costumes and the cross burning and stuff from the film. That wasn't what Nathan Forrest had made. And then there's a third iteration later. But anyway, the Knights of fill in the blank were common clubs, the Knights of this, the Knights of that,
Right.
all throughout the South and the border states. So it was just something some Yankee paper would say
Right. And
because it
also
was spooky. And
they they tied the vigilance committee members with, those vigilance committee members were up on Stone Mountain. Well, there was only 2 of them that were part of the vigilance committee that did that, and there was 25 total. So that's interesting too, but it had nothing to do with the Knights of Mary Phagan. I mean, it was just called the Vigilance Committee, and that's what they all been calling themselves. I feel like if Marietta Jewish community is so upset about this, why don't they just put signs up everywhere on the buildings where all the people, the members of the Vigilance Committee were on there? You know, we all know who they are, and it's really amazing how the tune of the rabbi has changed when he really found out who they were. I knew who they were when I wrote my book. And my dad and I decided that we were not going to release those names because we knew for certain that some of those families did not know. They did not know they were part of the Vigilance Committee. And it was not our right to tell them that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with lynching the guy. Like, he raped a girl, he murdered her.
Well, my
Got what?
father,
Yeah.
Daddy and I were just being more sensitive to the families that were living that didn't know. What a shock, because it was a shock when
Sure.
the names came out. And Steve Oney's the one that did that in 2003, and that was his whole purpose in writing his book, is that he wanted to have he took 17 years to write that book.
This crime was so horrific. It's unfortunate, not like now. I mean, people get raped and murdered, but that just didn't happen, especially little kids.
Right.
And that's why the whole town said, "Oh, okay, that's it." The most shocking thing I could compare it to is that guy in Ohio who kept 2 girls in his basement for years, wouldn't let them out. He just had sex slaves in his house, and was her name Amanda something? Anyway, she was fine. One of the girls finally escaped, but that was that case was so shocking. He just kept them on their knees in a room for years, raped
Right.
them every day. Like that doesn't happen. That's kind of how this was in 1913. Like a child, like a 13-year-old kid getting raped and murdered. That just was beyond any kind of crime that had ever happened at that time. It's just unheard of completely.
Right. When the detectives found her body, and they went down there, and I think it was Detective Black, I'm not sure, or Starnes, but one of them said, "Oh my God, it's a little girl."
Amanda Berry. I just looked it up.
Okay.
Yeah, she's like, I'm Amanda Berry, and she escaped.
Well,
I mean, he had babies
definitely
with him,
horrible. Yeah.
and
And
then he
there's
just
like,
bury him in the yard. Yeah.
yeah, well, that's, it's,
Yep.
yeah, and my daddy told me that, she's supposed to be, the original intention was to burn her in the incinerator. And I did find that information too. I had no idea if in a way, you wonder what would have happened. I mean, nobody would have ever found her. But I believe that was God's intention to have her found, because my family was just so distraught about that,
He cut her throat. Is that what happened? Or
Well,
bashed her head in?
he strangled her. He strangled her.
Yeah.
She died from strangulation, but he did things to her body parts that were not nice. Which reminds me, the autopsy does clear the fact that in the I forget, what's his name? Pierre Van Passon in the 20s wrote a book, or in the 40s, and then he came out and said that there were bite marks on the body of Mary Phagan. No such thing. No such thing. They had x-rays. There weren't x-rays in 1913. Come on, people. So there's so many hoaxes out there about this case. It's, and here's another one that, oh, mass exodus of Jews left Atlanta after the lynching of Leo Frank. Never happened. In fact, it increased the population. But the city of Marietta has all those people that live through it there, and they're just saying, "Oh, we left, we left." Well, they left, but there was not a mass exodus at all of that.
They didn't hang him because he's a Jew. They hung him because he killed and raped a little girl.
Exactly.
I don't know why that's so hard for them to get through. But I guess they think our whole ethnic group's going to get blamed for this. But why? Why would that happen?
Right. Well, like I said, before, Fonnie Willis is now working on it, but she's got all those Trump issues. And the last statement that Barnes gave was that he's talked to her about it, and she's aware that it needs to be done, but he just doesn't know when, because she's in Georgia has a Georgia Senate committee that's investigating Fonnie Willis for political misconduct, fraud for funding certain things, and records request. I was denied records requests about the conviction integrity unit. So my thought is I'm going to submit to the Georgia Senate committee and to the Attorney General here in Georgia, Carr, to let them know that I would like to have my records. Everybody else is winning. They set a precedent. She had to pay $22,000 to the political judicial person, and now Ashley Marchant, she has to pay $54,000. I would like to have generational trauma that she continues to put on our family.
That's what they're doing too, by threatening to try and exonerate Leo Frank. Let's just let it rest, man. He got what he deserved. Let it be. You're messing with this family members now by doing this.
But they don't
Tell
care.
people where they can follow you and learn more about this case.
Okay, well, I have in 2009, I got, I was going to say an ugly word, but I don't say colorful metaphors. And so I started my own website, www.littlemaryphagan.com. It has all the evidence on there. It has all the newspaper articles on there. It has a series called You Are There, and we're going to start it again on X soon, on April 28th, when the first newspaper comes about finding her body, and it lets you read the three top stories of those three newspapers of what they're doing. So you tell me how they, because now they're saying it was the media frenzy and all this stuff. They've never said that for 100 years. It's never been that. Now all of a sudden it's because they're telling the lies. So I'm also on X, Mary Phagan Kean at Phagan Kean. If you want to do whatever on that, text me. I always answer. I have a book, The Murder of Little Mary Phagan. It's on the website at no cost. I will not charge for this. I just want the information to be out there. We don't care about making money. I just want to have this as a record in the history of our family and what really happened to little Mary Phagan and all this stuff coming around. The new revision has everything. I mean, everything in it now. I mean, they've just done so many things, like Dale Schwartz in 1989, I think it was. Let me check my record. Hang on, 1989. He gave in the Atlanta Jewish Times the quote of the judge to the jury, and he said some very horrible things about African Americans in there, and it was completely a lie. It's a lie. That's not what the judge said. So I have that, and I have the original paper that I got about that, his instructions to the jury and who was on the jury and everything. So I do support everything with evidence. I have it. They don't. Theirs is just emotional. Mine's emotional too, but for a very different reason. But theirs is emotional because they really feel that he was convicted because he was Jewish. And of course, we have the colorful character Tom Watson. They always say, well, Tom Watson did all that. Yes, he did. He did write some anti-Semitic things.
10 different women came forward, girls, I should say, spoke when questioned about this pervert. There's no question what he did. He had blood on his clothing. I mean, it was him. Okay. Anyway.
I know.
You got the website, you got X. I hope
Yeah,
people can support you. I hope they'll read the book. It's free.
yeah, it's
And
free. I
then
mean, no
on the
money.
anniversary in April, you're
Yeah,
starting up a series again. Excellent.
yeah. So I'm just trying to, now I just want to thank the world because the world knows. And that was my goal, is to let this go worldwide, and with people like you and Stu Peters that are wanting to do podcasts with me. It's important to me to let the people know the truth, and truth wins.
It will. Thank you so much.
Thank you.